think I agree with you. The Elves deck is solid in this matchup, but Steven does have a couple flex cards here that could be very good if they come up at the right time.
We can't forget about Lightning Bolt, of course, and a little bit of counter magic and Force of Will and Daze. But we'll see what Jessup can put together as he sacrifices the Windswept Heath. He'll be searching up a land, and round number 13 is underway here from Worcester. It's a forest. It's a Green Sun Zenith on the hunt for a Dryad Arbor. If it does resolve, and it will. So Jessup with a little bit of mana acceleration to start things off here.
The problem is it's very hard to beat Elves unless you either lock them out of the game, typically with Umezawa's Jitte, or you can kill them very quickly. Because eventually they can get Craterhoof Behemoth through natural order, and even from a pretty small board, that can be lethal if the other player's been taking chip shots along the way from various Elf attacks.
Polluted Delta will be sacrificed here by Rice, so it's 19 all. See what land he does want to search up. He'll go with the Volcanic Island. Given that he is playing itself, so doesn't have to worry about Wasteland. So able to search up the non-basic. He does have a card like a Taxian Probe. Also has Swift Spear. Looks like 2 probes in hand. Also a Ponder too. So see how Rice wants to navigate things. Looks like he will start with the Swift Spear. And at least one Gataxian Probe will be cast with Phyrexian mana. So Rice is going to go down to 17. Looking to see Jessup's hand. There's a Glimpse of Nature over there, along with a Wirewood Symbiote. A couple of lands here in Gaia's Cradle and Wooded Foothills, and then the big bad Craterhoof Behemoth.
This is potentially a very explosive hand from Jessup's side. If he draws a cheap creature next turn, you might just see him glimpse and try to, if not completely go off, build a large enough board where the following turn Gaia's Cradle alongside Craterhoof Behemoth can set up a kill.
Yeah, his hand may not look great, but all it takes is one creature and Glimpse resolving, and then his hand could become great quickly.
Now, if Andrew's draw step next turn is a land, let's say, or another Craterhoof Behemoth or a natural order, it's pretty anemic. But if he draws anything cheap, it could be very explosive.
Here's an attack for 2 with the Swift Spear. It's 17 all. Jessup will take a draw. Picked up a copy of Elvish Visionary. Not too bad there. It's kind of awkward with how it sits.
Jessup would really prefer a 1-mana creature because that would allow him to glimpse, play Symbiote, play another land, have some mana floating.
Oh, it might not be too bad here just to start off with a Glimpse, cast a Symbiote, see what you draw into.
If you draw another 1-mana card, it's still pretty good value.
Yeah.
So, and the worst case scenario is next turn you have Visionary plus Symbiote plus Cradle in play, which is not a bad base.
Yeah, you're not unhappy with that. Cradle will come down. Here's Wirewood Symbiote to start. There'll be a trigger from the Glimpse. Take a draw. This will tap for 2 green. There's the Elvish Visionary. Going to draw from Glimpse, draw from Visionary since it has resolved, so 2 more cards coming. So a bunch of cards have been drawn. Got some stuff on the battlefield. Going to untap, return here. Untap there. Deploy. A Heritage Druid, draw a card. Good turn all around.
And this is definitely the type of hand that can have a lethal turn 3 Craterhoof Behemoth.
Easily. I'll pass the turn back, Will Jessup. Over to Rice. Rice will take a draw. Picked up a copy of Force Will. That's timely. Would have liked the last turn, obviously, but still good this turn.
Yeah, it's not a bad consolation prize because if he doesn't have Force of Will this coming turn, he might not get to the next one.
Misty Rainforest to play. Sacrifice the Misty.
Standard PIQ players, your pairings are online at pairings.starcitygames.com and are being posted on the pairings boards out in the hallway on pink paper.
So Rice down to 16. Looking to keep up here. You mentioned powerful cards that he has access to, like a Forked Bolt, Lightning Bolt. Definitely has some pinpoint removal. Just doesn't look to have very much of it in his hand, so he's going to play Young Pyromancer this turn. Not all that exciting of a turn. Here's a Gataxian Probe. Couple triggers here, one for the Pyromancer and then Prowess for the Swift Spear. And life total doesn't matter all that much for Stephen Rice because he's just going to get killed in one big chunk.
Yeah, he can be pretty liberal just using his life total as a resource here. I feel like Stephen may not be appropriately gauging the direness of the situation here. I think playing Young Pyromancer and Gataxian Probing is sort of saying, I feel like Force of Will can keep Andrew from killing me next turn. That isn't necessarily the case. I think I would have preferred to see a Ponder looking for Fort Bolt. If you break up Andrew's mana going into next turn, then you have a pretty large cushion. But as it stands, I think he risks dying even through a Force of Will.
Here's another probe. Lightning Bolt was the draw, so now another elemental token. Another trigger of prowess. Draw another card. Picked up a copy of Flooded Strand. Here comes the Swift Spear. And Jessup will take the hit for 3. He's down to 14. Pass the turn back. Jessup will draw. Picked up another Cradle. This could get ugly. You know, the Force is good for the fact that, you know, it counters the Crater of Behemoth, but Jessup can still do plenty this turn without just saying, I hope my Crater of Behemoth is good.
He's drawn a bunch of cards, and
Yeah.
even if Crater of Behemoth wasn't good, Andrew could go back to just Visionary plus Symbiote that Steven knows about and try to grind out some card advantage that way.
But now he's got a lot of mana. He's only going to have more of it now, as he has a Cradle in his hand and a Cradle in play. And given the change to Legendary Rule, this is certainly going to help him. He'll draw a card from this Heritage Druid. This Cradle's going to tap for 4 green. Got 3 green floating. There's a Nettle Sentinel. That'll draw a card. Let's put it up to 6 green.
And now you're seeing one of the powerful interactions of this deck, which is Nettle Sentinel along something like Birchlore Rangers or Heritage Druid. Those things untap every time a spell gets cast. They can be tapped for mana, and everything cycles. So you can see how this quickly generates a lot of resources, cards, mana, and stuff in play.
He's got 5 green floating right now. He's going to go up to 8. He's having a grand old time. Hadn't even used the Wirewood Symbiote yet. Down to 6, 2 cards coming.
It's not out of the question that Jessup could win this turn by casting Crater Hoof Behemoth and then casting a second one and beating Force of Will that way.
Up to 9 green. Down to 1 green.
Modern players, if you do not yet have an opponent, please go ahead and raise your hand to help your opponents.
Glimpse, of course, triggers when you cast a creature. It doesn't have to resolve. Here, Force of Will. So Crater Behemoth will be countered. Thankfully for Stephen Rice, because he would be dead if it wasn't. So that's a thing. Keep in mind, Jessup hasn't played land yet. Now's as good a time as any. Here's a
1,
Cradle.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana.
Still trying to find their seat.
Perhaps a Zenith. Natural Order works just fine, too. So there goes Heritage Druid. Jessup wondering if this resolves. The answer is yes. Plenty of mana floating. And it's time for a big old Behemoth. Deck plays 2 after all. This is what you talked about, where, yeah, you can counter the first Crater of Behemoth, but I can find a second one and still kill you.
And that's why I felt Steven last turn needed to dig for Fort Bolt or Lightning Bolt or some piece of removal rather than cast your own Pyromancer. Because it was just too likely that Andrew had a hand that was capable of powering through 1 Force of Will with all the mana available that he had going into the turn.
And that's exactly what he was able to do. Andrew Jessup is going to win game number 1 here over Stephen Rice. Elves up a game over Blue-Red Delver very quickly. We take a look at the sideboards. We will start with Stephen Rice and his Blue-Red Delver deck, where you'll find a Pyroblast, a Smash Smithereens, a Grim Lavamancer, 2 Price of Progress, 1 Pith Needle, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Flusterstorm, a Wear Tear, a Nithosworn Canis, a Sulfuric Vortex, 2 Meddling Mages, and 2 Red Elemental Blasts. He does have a very small splash of white here, as you can tell from some fetch lands, obviously, and then a Tundra.
Nithosworn Canis is pretty solid against Elves. I like the copy of Grafdigger's Cage. I like the Pithy Needle, and I like the Grim Lavamancer. I think those are all nice additions.
What do we see on the other side?
3 copies of Thoughtseize, 3 copies of Cabal Therapy, a Pithy Needle, a Null Rod, 3 copies of Abrupt Decay, a Sylvan Library, a Scavenging Ooze, a Reclamation Sage, and a Progenitus. A couple cards I like here. I can see the copies of Abrupt Decay coming in as these kind of decks, Blue-Red Delver, occasionally have Umezawa's Jitte in the sideboard, and it's just a nice removal spell in a general sense. I think the Scavenging Ooze can come in because Blue-Red Delver is typically the type of deck that struggles to answer large creatures. If he's sideboarding anything, it's probably removal spells, so Andrew's graveyard could be stocked. And I don't mind bringing in the Progenitus in this matchup. Blue-Red Delver can't really get out from under it. Again, if he's boarding in a lot of removal spells, it may be difficult for Andrew to establish a big Crater Hoof Behemoth, but from a very low base, he can natural order for Progenitus, and Steven is left with very little outs to that situation.
Well, Stephen Rice is going to go to the drawing board. Does get a little bit better after sideboard for him, but we'll see how things do change for both players as we'll discuss the Star City Games changes to our buy list. We unveiled this at the Season 1 Invitational a couple months ago. But if you haven't seen it, it's certainly important that you do. It's a lot easier now.
A significant upgrade over the previous buy list, which was just essentially a list of every single card Star City Games was buying. The new buy list, if you have certain specifics with your card, like a foreign language, a condition, foil, non-foil, you can punch that into the search engine and see what Star City Games is paying for it. You can also print out your buy list order and mail that into Star City Games or hand it to a dealer, very much expediting the process. You need to be registered for the website to be able to access the buy list, but that's free to do, and you should be doing that anyway. Go over to starcitygames.com/buy-list and check it out right now.
We have Blue Red Delver versus Elves here in the feature match area. Looks like we might have some time to jump to a backup match, as that first game was a quick one.
Steven is definitely the control deck in this matchup.
For sure.
It's a weird sort of thing, and you know, Burn has a lot of those characteristics against Elves as well, where you have to be the control deck, but you can't be too controlling because eventually Elves will overwhelm you, but either by getting Progenitus or simply by getting Critterhoof Behemoth into play with 2 creatures. That can kill you. So you have to answer their early board, but you also need to be killing them fast enough that the game doesn't drag out so long that they're able to kill you in some incidental way. It's very hard to split that difference.
Elves is a pretty popular deck on day 2. We had 121 players making it to day 2 of the 535 that began the competition, and 10 copies of Elves into day 2. We haven't seen a lot of it, mostly just Andrew Jessup playing it. You think of a player like Ross Merriam, who has played Elves a lot, but he's playing Sultai Delver this particular weekend. But Jessup is certainly doing a nice job with the Elves deck. He's 10-2, currently up a game, and what looks to be a pretty good matchup for him, too. So with a win here, he goes to 11-2 and very close to top 8 then.
Yeah, no real blowout cards in Steven's sideboard. Grafdigger's Cage is nice, but Andrew has probably brought in his Abrupt Decays. The one Grim Lavamancer can be very valuable for Steven. Not easy for Andrew to kill. Again, basically just the Abrupt Decays. And an unchecked Lavamancer allows Steven to do that dance of being the control deck, but not too controlling. Allows him to answer Andrew's early board, but without a huge investment, without using a ton of cards. And then his creatures can focus on just beating Andrew to death.
Both players will take a look at their 7 cards here in just a moment. Stephen Rice on your left, Andrew Jessup on your right. Blue Red Delver via Elves. Let's see if Stephen Rice can find a pretty good opening hand. Not that his last hand was bad, just didn't really line up very well against Elves. I think he would keep his opening hand every time in the dark, but just did not have the pinpoint removal spells to take care of Elves.
Turn 1 Monastery Swift Spear, turn 2 Young Pyromancer is going to get you killed on turn 3 a good percentage of the time.
Yeah.
Andrew had a good hand, but that's not that uncommon.
And he had a Force Will too.
Yeah.
Misty Rainforest to start. He's going to sacrifice that. I imagine we'll see a Volcanic Island here in just a moment as he goes down to 19.
But that's why it's so important for Steven to be managing Andrew's board. He had a Force of Will and still got killed on the 3rd turn because he didn't interact on against Andrew's board for turns 1 or 2.
Now this is a much better hand for Steven.
Yeah, got some Swift Spears, some Gataxian Probes, some Bolts, a Force of Will. This is a really solid opening.
There is the Gataxian Probe. See what Jessup is working with here. Got Natural Order and Abrupt Decay. Nettle Sentinel, Wooded Foothills, Glimpse, Zenith, and a Scavenging Ooze. Who's very good against Blue Red Delver, oddly enough.
If Steven is sideboarding in anything, it's more Bolts for the most part. And this deck does not handle large creatures well.
Never has.
So a 4/4 Scavenging Ooze is a big problem for Steven.
C-Rice is going to record the contents of the Gataxian Probe. He'll draw a card to copy Misty Rainforest. That's land number 2 for him. And he'll attack for 2 as well. Jessup down to 18. Jessup takes his first draw of the game. He will start with the Wooded Foothills. Go down to 17. Tie game.
Sort of.
Get a Bayou. And this will be an attempt at a Green Sun Zenith, it seems. We'll see if this resolves. And it will. So Dryadar will be searched up. Might be the target of a lightning bolt here soon, though.
Andrew's opening hand was so light on lands that I feel like this is almost Force of Willable.
Very close.
Yeah. I think with a bolt in hand, it's easy for Steven to just say, okay, that's going to resolve, and I'll save the Force of Will for some big payoff card.
Rice will draw, picked up a copy of Brainstorm. His draws really come together nicely this game. Looks like he's going to start with a Brainstorm. He'll draw 3 cards. One of the cards in hand is Dig Through Time, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that go back. A couple of lands found here in Scalding Tarn and Polluted Delta. Swift Spear was the other card drawn with the Brainstorm. So 2 cards, of course, will have to go back here for Rice.
Yeah, the 3 cards on the left of Steven's hand feel like the 3 weakest. The 2 lands and the Swift Spear.
Looks like he will set 2 lands back. Brainstorm is done resolving. He'll sacrifice the Misty Rainforest, go down to 16. And we'll likely have another Volcanic Island taken out of the deck here in just a moment. Can't forget that he does have Tundra, however. Small white splash in his deck.
And you can see some of the sideboard cards you would have anticipated Steven bringing in his deck as he was searching for that Volcanic Island. You saw a Grafdigger's Cage and a Grim Lavamancer. No surprises here.
Nope. Both those cards great in this matchup. See if he wants to go the Swift Spear route or the Lightning Bolt route.
I feel like Steven just needs to focus on pinning down the mana as much as possible, especially with Andrew revealing a hand last turn that was very light on lands.
This will be an attack for 3. Brainstorm was the first spell, Lightning Bolt the second, and of course Swift Spear has base power of 1. So pretty nice turn here. There's a Nettle Sentinel. And Jessup can just pass the turn back. And Lightning Bolt on the Dried Arbor, very, very good as a Volcanic Island to draw here for Rice. There's land 3. There's Swift Spear number 2. And there's Lightning Bolt number 2. Get this Nettle Sentinel out of the way. Get in for 4 points of damage. Jessup down to 10.
5 cards in the graveyard, setting Steven up for Dig Through Time next turn if he wants it.
Yep.
Also just sit on Force of Will plus blue card.
There's Windswept Teeth. Jessup will sacrifice. Gonna be a tough game for Jessup to come back.
Yeah, this is the right mixture of stuff that Steven needs, is some early pressure and then sub removal, so he can contain Andrew's board while pressuring him. That mixture of cards he was lacking there in the first game.
Let's see what we have here for Jessup. It'll be a copy of Elvish Visionary. That'll cantrip. Not a good blocker in this situation, though. Surely not going to beat a Swift Spear in combat. Might be on chump blocking duty as soon as this turn, honestly. Well, there's a 6 card in the graveyard for Dig Through Time.
Yeah, that was a great draw here for Steven because he would ideally not use his entire turn casting Dig Through Time. So fetch land kind of amounts to 2 mana this turn as it puts a card in the graveyard and it's a land drop. It doesn't look like a nice draw at this point. It feels like he's floating out a little bit, but Steven would ideally Dig Through Time this turn and follow up with something.
I think that's part of the reason you saw him just take it from the top of his deck, put it directly into play. Card 6, Dig Through Time costs 2 mana, which means he gets to look at 7 and take 2 with him. Delver Secrets. Oh boy, Fire Ice. There's a Daze in there too. Grafdigger's Cage, Young Pyromancer. Oh, Steven, you get 1 more. That's how good that card is. Yeah, hard to say no to Fire Ice.
Yeah, I think Fire Ice plus Daze is going to be really hard for Andrew to come back from. The Fire Ice is another prowess trigger. You split 1 and 1. Jessup goes down to 8. Then he goes down to 2 from the attacks, and you still have Force of Will plus blue card plus 2 creatures in play.
Yeah.
That is asking a lot.
Oh, he's made his selection, has Rice. There's Fire. Oh, 1 and 1. Another prowess trigger. Give you those beatdowns. You said it, Force Will plus blue card is going to be really hard to beat. Those are the last 2 cards in Steven Rice's hand.
Yeah, I think Steven might have taken Ponder instead of Daze, but it's all the same. And just have a blue card to pair with your Force of Will.
Absolutely. And again, whatever Jessup does here basically puts him on chump blocking duty. He's already down to 2. Had some mana issues this game. The Dried Arbor got killed by a Lightning Bolt. It was pretty simplistic stuff here for Steven Rice. That's why I think we'll be headed to a 3rd game here in just a moment. Jessup going to give his hand the once-over to see if there's any way to get out of this situation, but I'd be surprised if there is.
Yep. A spell does not help. It has to be abrupt decay, basically.
He has
to do anything.
He has one of those in his hand. Not that it matters a ton.
If Steven has a ponder left over, then he simply untaps, casts ponder,
Kill you.
triggers prowess, and kills him.
Yeah.
So
If Jessup's combination of cards is land, some sort of creature, abrupt decay or creature, maybe he stays alive.
yeah.
Here's Misty Rainforest. That's going to put him down to 1.
And now Steven doesn't even need a prowess trigger. He just needs to connect once.
Yep. So Jessup will search up a basic forest. See the evolution of Blue-Red Delver, especially with Treasure Cruise leaving the format. Cards like Dig Through Time make it into the main deck. Fire Ice. A few more cantrips as well. There's Queer and Ranger. Pass the turn back. The plan here is to block with Queer and Ranger and abrupt decay something. Bryce will draw a card. He will ponder triggers there. Take a look at a couple of cards. Many will get the job done. Though 2 days' Young Pyromancer currently will not. We'll see a shuffle with the ponder. Any burn spell, another Swift Spear. A lot of cards will get the job done here. Heck, even the one of Goblin Guide.
So Steven's draw for the turn was a Polluted Delta. This actually makes things a little risky on his side of the table, that he's shuffling and drawing a random card. And now that he's drawn Lightning Bolt, everything else is kind of trivial. But let's say he draws a land off that ponder. Suddenly Andrew gets out of this turn, and there's no counterspell available for Steven.
Yep.
Things could have gotten off the rails here. Finding Lightning Bolt is the best case scenario, but I think Steven might have been better served either holding on to the ponder or taking days so his Force of Will is still alive the next turn.
Maybe just attacking that turn with the Swift Spears. You kill the Queer and Ranger, the other one gets killed, and then you've got Force of Will with Ponder.
Yeah.
Sure. Either way, Stephen Rice with the Lightning Bolt is going to get the job done here over Andrew Jessup. We'll get ready for game number 3 here between Blue-Red Delver and Elves. Though, for Jessup, I think it's very important that he's on the play here for game number 3.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of what happened in that game was Steven got a clock going and then could leverage all the removal spells in his hand. If Steven's on the back foot a little bit and has to choose between developing his board or playing removal spells, that's a much better position for Andrew to be in.
Game number 3 going to be underway here shortly. Andrew Jessup is someone who's made his climb up the ranks through the IQ circuit, as have many, like Kevin Jones, Ross Merriam, in the race for the Players' Championship. IQs are super important here if you want to qualify for the Players' Championship, or heck, just for the Invitationals, which are sweet tournaments.
Exactly. We have 2 of them going on right now, as we do during every Open, but you can bring IQs to your local area as well. All of our IQ kits come with a bunch of exclusive prizes, including playmats, dice bags, creature collection pins, top 8 pins, invitational winner tokens, SCG premium vouchers. Some of these are top 8 prizes. Some of them are given out to everyone who signs up. And again, you can always bring these events to your local store as a path to qualify for the Invitational as more local organized play, or for some of our players as a way to try to get to the Players' Championship.
StarCityGames.com for more information as game number 3 will be underway here shortly between Andrew Jessup and Stephen Rice. I want to thank you guys for joining us at home. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here in the booth. You can join in on the conversation on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag SCGWOR, as we make our way through a couple more rounds of the Swiss here. We'll make a cut to the top 8 after round number 15, of course. And then, of course, the real fun starts, where we'll have 8 players battling it out. First place will get $5,000, 25 Open Series points, and an invite to our Season 2 Invitational at the Origins Game Fair just 2 weeks from now. Felt like just yesterday we were covering the Season 1 Invitational in Richmond.
Yep. Columbus is a great city. Really enjoy going out there. Underrated nightlife. Good eats.
Good eats. Definitely some good eats.
Origins is a great show.
Yep.
Historically significant. It used to be the place where United States National Championships were held, the Amateur Championships, Sideboard Team Challenge. A lot of iconic events of Magic's early history.
Almost a great place to be in the summer, too.
Yep.
Hopefully not too humid there when we go in June. Crazy to think half this year's already over. Just about.
Yeah, we're close.
Close to the halfway mark.
Yep. We are close.
I know we'll see Andrew Jessup there in a couple weeks. Not sure if Stephen Rice will be there. With the Jessup brothers, along with number 84,
Jim Davis.
Jim Davis. Not here this weekend, taking the weekend off. I know he's getting ready for the Season 2 Invitational, actually. He's been testing Modern. Got to get ready for that portion of the tournament. Doesn't play a lot of Modern. So it'll be fun to see what Jim's actually deciding to play that in that format.
For a lot of our players, we just had not, a lot of our top Open Series players, besides the Open really in Baltimore this year, we have not gotten a lot of opportunities to watch them play Modern.
Both players going to take a look at their opening hands, decide if they are happy with what they see. Looks like they are, and Mr. Rainforest will kick us off here for game number 3. You can see Stephen Rice's hand is pretty good. You got Force of Will and Ponder, a couple copies of Lightning Bolt, a couple of lands there, and Flooded Strand and Volcanic Island, so no way he's throwing that one back.
No, but this is one of those hands that I discussed before of perhaps Steven is pushed into too controlling of a position in the matchup. He doesn't have all day. It's not enough to just bolt a couple elves and say that they can't go off anymore. So until this is all backed up by a creature, this is a hand that's liable for the game to drag out for a while, but not necessarily result in a win for Steven.
Mr. Rainforest will bring Rice down to 19. He's got himself a Volcanic Island here. That'll be a Lightning Bolt to take care of the Deathrite Shaman. Rice's hand is a little land heavy at this point. I'm sure he'd like to save that Ponder to go along Force of Will, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him cast it next turn for a little bit of help, as Jessup's going to sacrifice his Windswept Teeth, go down to 18. We'll get a land out of the deck.
You would like to sign up for the 1 p.m.
I think Andrew may have drawn the Progenitus.
Oh, the classic.
Yeah.
The SCG Live Classic.
An Open Series tradition.
Yes.
The Progenitus just swimming to the top of your deck, poking its head out of the water, and hopping into your hand.
See, Ross Merriam thinks that he's the only one that has to deal with this, so it's not true, though. Here's an Elvish Visionary. Draw a card. It truly is the classic.
What's going on over here? Let's go check out the action.
Well, when you sideboard cards into the goal is to draw them.
You might draw them.
That's typically the goal is to draw them. Here's a Ponder. Force of Will, Young Pyromancer, and Gataxian Probe, the cards that Rice is looking at here.
And I'm not throwing back a Young Pyromancer at this stage. That's kind of the ideal card for Steven to pair with the other tools he has in his hand. Counter spells, removal spells, they become a lot better when they're backed up by some pressure.
We'll see how he wants to set things up here. If he does want to keep these 3, I'd like Probe on top, Force of Will after that, Pyromancer after that. Because drawing Pyromancer this turn doesn't really do all that much.
I like Probe drawn this turn, Young Pyromancer drawn next turn, Force of Will the turn after. Because I want to draw Young Pyromancer next turn.
Sure.
Cast Gataxian Probe, draw the Force of Will.
Sure. I could see myself wanting to draw Probe you right now, see what your hand is, and then draw Force of Will, so that I have a Force of Will and a blue card to go along with my Force of Will to counter if you're going to do something awesome.
Sure.
And then Pyromancer next turn.
With Force of Will already in Steven's hand, he can just take the Gataxian Probe and have Force of Will plus blue card this turn if he wants it.
Sure.
What I would not have done is shuffle away, because those
I liked all those cards.
I feel like that's a pretty solid set of cards for Steven to be looking at there. Got to be better than 3 draws at random.
Yeah. Flooded Strand and a passing of the turn here. That ends Rice's turn, so we head back Jessup's way. In comes the Visionary. The follow-up is another Visionary. That'll resolve, draw a card. Cradle is the draw. Always terrifying when an Elves player picks that up. Taps for so much mana.
And especially with Andrew under no pressure, and his board's not being contested either. So he's got a lot of different ways to play this game out. He does not have to do anything particularly risky. He can take his time, and with Wirewood Symbiote in his hand, that's a great path as well. He can sit back and just draw a bunch of cards here. Hard for Steven to break this up. And he can just play this kind of game.
Well, 2 Wirewood Symbiotes is certainly pretty nice now. You do wonder how much Jessup was willing to extend, given he is playing against a blue-red deck. You see in Teamer Delver, they have cards like Rough Tumble. Sometimes you'll find Pyroclasm as well. But he's willing to put all the stuff out there.
And we call the deck, sometimes Elves is called Combo Elves, and it's, obviously has elements of being a combo deck. But that doesn't necessarily mean Force of Will is very good against the deck. If you're pressuring the deck in other ways, if you're attacking their board or threatening a quick kill of your own, Force of Will can shut the door on their way to kill you quickly. But if you give them enough time, they're going to be able to overpower you. Like we saw in game 1 where Andrew Jessup just went off with Glimpse, was able to cast 2 Crater Hoof Behemoths in 1 turn. You're seeing another version of that this game, where Andrew is going to just be drawing a bunch of cards with Wirewood Symbiote and Elvish Visionary and overpowering Force of Will that way.
Brainstorming to fetch. Stephen Rice did find a copy of Forked Bolt. Certainly good on this board.
Critical that he has it. He's got to break up these Symbiotes right now. They're still going to do some harm bringing the Visionaries back here, but...
At least one Visionary.
Steven can stave off the worst of it.
Yeah. Forked Bolt picked up a lot in popularity when Blue Red Delver got big, and Elves was pretty big at that time too. There's a land in Blue to Delta.
This is a very vulnerable hand here for Steven. He is not a ton of pressure.
It's not a great spot.
No blue card to pair with this Force Will, and Andrew generating a lot of card advantage.
Yeah. Now, Jessup doesn't know he doesn't have a card to pair with the Force of Will. We'll see if he can maybe deduce that information, or maybe he just says, I don't care, cast my spells.
Well, Steven sort of showed what his strategy was there in the first game, where he said, go ahead and do everything that you want to do, build up your board, and I'm going to try to use Force of Will to stop your big play. Didn't end up working in game 1, but that's what Steven tried to do. So I think Andrew at this stage can probably deduce nothing in terms of the Force of Will having a blue card or not, because Steven was willing to allow Andrew to have these incremental spots of card advantage.
Jessup did pick up both copies of Elvish Visionary in response to the Forked Bolt. So now Rice will sacrifice this blue to Delta. Another Volcanic likely on the way, as he goes by the Tundra, so it doesn't seem as though he boarded any of his white cards here.
Well, he's casting a Swift Spear this turn, so I guess he still wants the Volcanic. I would be surprised if he didn't bring in the Canoness, because Canoness is a nice card against Elves. But
there is old Swifty.
Canoness is also a little awkward for Steven's deck as well, because his deck is trying to cast 2, 3, 4 spells a turn in certain turns.
Yeah.
So it's possible he only brings it in matchups like Storm, where it's definitely awesome.
Jessup's got a board to rebuild now, as Rice has finally found some pressure. He'll start with Elvish Visionary. Then he'll go Can, trip in. Query and Ranger the draw. See what his follow-up's going to be. He does have a Dried Arbor in hand. He plays that. He can't tap that for mana right away, but it will add mana to the Cradle. So in a way, oddly enough, it doesn't have Summoning Sickness.
Yeah,
then.
it plays like a land drop. It's the same thing as a Forest this turn with the Cradle out there. And you get the Summoning Sick land, so to speak, out of your hand first.
That's what he's going to do. So now the Cradle will tap for 2. There's another Visionary. Time to draw a card. As oftentimes the case, the Elves deck setting up for one relatively large turn. This is the build-up. See what Rice draws. Looks like another copy of Swift Spear.
And this is why I keep bringing up the fact that Steven needs pressure.
Yep.
Because left uncontested, Andrew can take his sweet time drawing a bunch of cards and building up a hand that can go off through a removal spell or through a counter spell.
He needs things to go like they went last game.
Right, Swift Spear into Bolts, into 1 Force of Will, and close the game out with Andrew having 5 or 6 cards left in his hand. That's the kind of game plan you want to execute.
Game goes like this, it's a lot worse. Swift Spears are coming into the red zone. Rice with a Lightning Bolt in hand, but doesn't look like he has interest in casting on anything that's on the table. He'll play a Scalding Tarn. See the hand there, Volcanic Island. Force of Will and Lightning Bolt. Pass the turn back over to Jessup, and Jessup gets to have a little bit of fun here, it seems, as he takes a draw step. Picked up a copy of Wirewood Symbiote.
Very nice pairing here with his Elvish Visionaries. Can start rebuilding that shop.
Looks like he's a little ways away from casting the Progenitors, though.
Yeah.
A little bit
Now-
of work to do.
Steven's hand's very vulnerable right now. I believe he only has the Lightning Bolt as a castable spell.
Yep.
Can't access his Force Will. Andrew does not know that. So Andrew is going to not try to put all of his eggs in the basket and just cast a natural order and hoping that it resolves if he can avoid it. It's just going to be a slow, incremental build-up to a spot where he has 2 lethal cards he can cast.
Much like game 1.
Yep, same recipe.
First step is Wirewood Symbiote. After that is a Quirion Ranger. See, Wright's going to take a look at that one. Rather unique card in this deck. You return a force you control to your hand. You untap target creature. Oftentimes we'll see that in combination with Dried Arbor. Nets you a little more mana that way.
Kind of a funky design.
Yeah. You can only use it once each turn. Otherwise, it would be much too good. But in combination with Wirewood Symbiote, you can actually have some real fun. Cradle's going to tap for 5 green at this point.
Alexis Cohen, please come to the
6.
side of the stage. Your commander pod
Going to use
is
the
ready.
Wirewood Symbiote, return
Alexis
here,
Cohen,
untap
please come to
there.
the side of the stage.
That's
Your commander
7,
pod is ready.
potentially.
You think the Visions development team was on the interactions that Quirion Ranger could generate?
No.
If I
don't.
had to guess, I would guess it was Fast Bond. Was the card that made him put that clause on there.
Sure.
I don't know, but that would be my best guess.
4 mana floating at this point.
That is busted.
That's probably good. It's probably
That is a lot of mana. But who knows? Who knows?
search through the annals of time at some point.
There's someone out there who knows the answer to this.
That's
My
true.
best guess is Fast Bond, but could be something else.
There's the land for the turn for Jessup, as he had not played one yet. It'll be a Wooded Foothills. He'll sacrifice this. It could be a Dried Arbor he goes and gets. Maybe yes, maybe no. He's already used his Cradle, so no guarantee. And given that this is his land drop, that means another Cradle's not coming this turn.
Yep.
But he will search for a Dried Arbor. So maybe a Natural Order's in store. He does have 4 mana floating after all. There is Natural Order. Going to sacrifice the Summoning 6 Dried Arbor and put Stephen Rice to the test. Do you have a Force of Will, my friend? Well, the answer is sort of.
Technically, yes.
Technically, I do. Looks like we have a Lightning Bolt that's going to go after something in response. He'll take care of the Wirewood Symbiote. So that thing's going to bite the dust. Now is Natural Order good? The answer is yes. Jessup's going to pick up his deck. He'll search for Craterhoof Behemoth. Trigger, a lot of damage, and an extension of the hand. Andrew Jessup's going to win this game and match here over Stephen Rice. Elves is going to move on to 11-2 over Blue-Red Delver. And for Andrew Jessup, his brother's having a pretty good tournament, but Andrew's having a great one. He's 11-2.
Yeah, great run here for Andrew Jessup so far. Good shot at making the top 8. When Mike Flores wrote that article, Who's the Beatdown? Very important Magic strategy article back in the day, talking about role assessment and who's the aggressor and who's the control deck and who needs to play aggressively and who needs to play passively. And that can be kind of a fluid thing. Decks can do one thing or the other.